In 1950, the average conflict lasted 5 years. In the 80s, it was 15, and now it's over 20. There is no doubt about it. Sadly, it's not all good news. Wars are getting longer, but this might actually be good news. I'll explain. So let's first answer why are wars getting longer. The first thing we have to notice is that wars have changed. Those happening between countries are not gone, obviously, but they are a lot less common. Most modern wars are actually civil wars. For every Ukraine, there is a Syria, Libya, or Ethiopia. So the question is not why are wars longer, but why are civil wars so long? And here there are multiple reasons. Let's start with the military one. Modern civil wars usually happen in unstable countries, and most of the time one side is not significantly stronger than the other, so it's harder to achieve a full victory. And even when it is, modern technology has surprisingly helped the underdogs. For example, a rocket launcher has the price of a used car and can take out a tank that costs millions. A tank also needs multiple very skilled people with a lot of training. And a rocket launcher, I might be wrong, but I think with basic training even I could use one. This military balance of power means that it's hard to end wars one-sidedly. And the data we have also confirms this. More and more conflicts are ending with peace deals. I would say that broadly this is a good thing. There is less of a chance for the winning side to take revenge after the war, and it might create a more stable situation in the long run. The bad side is that negotiations are complicated and they take time. In order to understand why peace deals in the modern day are so hard to achieve, we need to get into the political reasons. In more and more conflicts, there are outside powers involved. These could be the big ones that come to mind, like the US, Russia, or China. But increasingly regional players as well, like Iran, Saudi Arabia, or Israel. The tricky part is that these outside supporters often have a lot to gain from the war, but suffer none of the consequences. Their people are not hurt, and their economies and militaries are not devastated. Let me explain the problem like this. Imagine you're leading a group fighting in a civil war with the support of Saudi Arabia. And you want to make peace, but Saudi Arabia doesn't want you to stop the fighting. And if you try to negotiate, they will cut off their support. Not only will you lose access to military equipment, but funding and information as well. If the negotiations fail, this would leave you in a far, far weaker position. To make matters worse, Saudi Arabia could also try to divide your group by supporting the pro-war faction within it, leading to a civil war within a civil war. And now, all of a sudden, there are three groups fighting and peace is nowhere in sight. And then there is the second reason, as strange as it sounds, it's public opinion. When countries go into a conflict, they do everything that they can to portray themselves as the righteous heroes, and they demonize the other side. In speeches, schools, and the media, sometimes with the help of the church. This is war propaganda. It preys on hatred and fear. You might think that this is something exclusive for the side being attacked, but no, it's common with aggressors as well. Russia and Ukraine, the US and Iraq, it's the same story. The other side hates us and they want to destroy us. Even if we started this war, their actions left us no choice. The worst thing about this propaganda is that it works. War propaganda is like digging a hole. Sure, holes can be useful, but if you dig too much for too long, you soon won't have a way out. After years of war propaganda, the population doesn't want to make peace. If they truly believe that the other side hates them so strongly that they want their destruction, how can they trust any sort of peace? Just think of it from the perspective of the everyday person that listened to propaganda for years. If you negotiate with the people that will destroy us, you're at best a weak leader and at worst a traitor. This is why negotiations are done in secret most of the time. Even the possibility of making peace is seen as a betrayal. In the past, countries could cover up peace deals and present them always in the most favorable light. But access to information is making this harder and harder. You might think that countries at war don't really care about public opinion, but nothing could be further from the truth. That's when they care about public opinion the most, because they're at their most vulnerable, not only from the outside, but from the inside as well. This is true even in dictatorships. Maybe the people can't participate in a government, but they sure can bring it down. These are some of the most important reasons why modern civil wars are so hard to end. And you might think that it's bad news, which it is, sort of. But what if I tell you that that chart from the beginning is only half the picture? And this is not gonna be a sad video. Although conflicts might be longer, in the last decades, casualties are the lowest they have ever been, despite the world population rising. There is one major thing we don't celebrate. Let's look at that chart from the beginning. Sure, civil wars have gotten longer, but wars between countries that are usually shorter but deadlier have almost disappeared. Since the year 2000, there have been 5 conflicts that we would normally think of as country wars. There are more that you can make an argument for, but I think that the following 5 fit the criteria we usually have: Iraq, Ukraine, Afghanistan, Georgia, and Libya. And it's been almost a quarter of a century. For comparison, between the year 1900 and 1923, only my country has been through 3 massive wars. And each of those 3 had the casualties of over 100 Russian-Georgian wars. Don't get me wrong, the situation is far from perfect, but it is better. And we should keep in mind that wars between countries are often, not always, but often, worse than civil wars. States can focus the power of their production and mobilize much of their population. This is also increasingly hard to do even when wars happen between countries. Russia did not and could not devote the majority of its economy to war production. It did not draft anywhere near the number of soldiers it would have half a century ago. Sure, wars today may be longer, but they are also fewer and less destructive on average. Now, time will tell if this is a temporary pause for humanity or the beginning of the end of wars. Sadly, it's not all good news. There are risks that could reverse this trend. Climate change is making living in parts of the world unbearable, leading to increased tensions. For example, the Sahel region, with 130 million people, could be a wasteland in a decade or two. Egypt and Ethiopia might start the first water war over a massive dam on the Nile. And yet, there are reasons to be optimistic. I made videos on these topics, and I'll admit that they're of a worse sound quality, but I still think you might enjoy them. The dam could change Ethiopia forever, and the giant tree wall is arguably humanity's most ambitious project. If successful, it will save millions of lives and prevent future wars. And if you want to support a small educational YouTube channel and learn about interesting things in the future, you can subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And most important of all, have an amazing day wherever you are.